Good morning, boys and girls! Today we're going to be reading a very exciting story about a trip all the way through the country of Australia. So we're traveling with Mickey Mouse and Goofy to solve a mystery and save the day. So will you read the title with me, please? Mickey and Goofy Down Under, an adventure in Australia. Let's open up and see what this book is all about. Now, I want you to pay careful attention to big events that happen in the story, because at the end we're going to do a big review and we're going to have to remember the order of 3 big events. So make sure you're paying close attention with your listening ears and eyes on me. One day, Mickey Mouse and Goofy went to the zoo to see the cuddly koalas from Australia. "This is my favorite part of the zoo," Goofy said. "Enjoy the koalas while you can," said Mr. Winsett, the zookeeper. "If we don't get more leaves for them to eat soon, we're going to have to send the koalas back to Australia." "Gosh, there are lots of trees around here," said Goofy. "These koalas will only eat a certain type of eucalyptus leaf from Australia," explained the zookeeper. "Why can't you get more of the kind of leaves that they like?" asked Mickey. Mr. Winsett sighed. "I don't understand it myself. We've been getting our leaves from the same company for years, and the deliveries have always been on time. Suddenly, something's gone wrong, but I have no idea what the problem is." Uh-oh. Mickey glanced from the worried zookeeper to the children gathered around the koalas. "We can't disappoint the children," he said. "Goofy and I will go to Australia and find out what has happened." "That would be wonderful," said Mr. Winsett, "but it won't be easy. You see, I'm not even sure where in Australia the leaves grow. All I know is the name of the company that ships the leaves from Sydney." "Who's Sydney?" Goofy asked. "Sydney isn't a person," Goofy answered Mickey. "It's a big city in Australia." Mr. Winsett invited Mickey and Goofy to his office, where he explained that koalas eat only 24 types of 603 kinds of eucalyptus leaves that grow in Australia. "Unfortunately, the leaves our koalas eat are difficult to find," said Mr. Winsett. "Our supplier, Outback Imports, should be able to help you. I'll make arrangements to have a guide waiting for you when you arrive in Sydney." After many hours in the air, Mickey and Goofy stepped off the plane in Sydney, Australia. "I wonder where our guide is," Mickey said. "Maybe it's that guy over there," said Goofy, pointing to a young man who carried a sign that said, "Welcome, Mickey Mouse and Goofy." Mickey stepped forward to shake hands with their guide, who introduced himself as Sam. Sam had been told all about the eucalyptus problem. He agreed with Mickey that the first step was to visit Outback Imports and find out what the company knew about the leaves. "The man who brings us those leaves is an old fellow named Dingo Dan," began Mr. Green, the manager of the company. "We've been worried about Dan. He's never been late with a shipment before, but no one has heard from him in over a week." Uh-oh, that does not sound good. He might be lost. "Do you think he's lost?" asked Goofy. Mr. Green shook his head. "Dingo Dan knows the bush like the back of his hand. I'm beginning to think that something has gone wrong." "We'll do our best to find him," Mickey declared. Mr. Green pointed to a map of Australia. "Dan works around Alice Springs in the Northern Territory," he explained. "Start at the Jumpin' Joey Hotel. Dan checks in there when he's not out in the bush." Oh, looks like they're going to the hotel. Mickey, Goofy, and Sam arrived at the Jumpin' Joey and were greeted by its owner, Matilda. She was also very worried about Dingo Dan. "I think the special leaves Dan gathers grow along the Todd River," she said. "No problem," said Goofy. "We'll just follow the river until we find Dingo Dan." "It's not that easy," said Sam. The Todd River flows underground, and the land around it is wild. Then we'd better get started right away, said Mickey in a determined voice. Mickey and Sam loaded supplies into the car. They filled some cans with extra gasoline and others with water to drink. They packed tents and mosquito nets for nights outside in the bush. Meanwhile, Goofy had bought a boomerang in a nearby store. Gosh, he said as he practiced without much success. If I learn how to throw this thing, I can play catch all by myself. Right now, you're playing fetch, said Mickey, laughing. Soon the three travelers were bouncing over the dusty tracks toward the Todd River. Goofy came to a stop to watch a group of kangaroos cross the road. Kangaroos! Mickey exclaimed. Gosh, why do the mother kangaroos carry their babies like that? Kangaroos and many other animals in Australia are called marsupials, Sam explained. Their babies are very small when they are born, so they are carried in their mother's pouches until they are big enough to gather food on their own. Koalas are marsupials too. Suddenly, Goofy swerved the car. Yikes, he cried, pointing to a strange-looking creature sitting on top of a big rock. What's that? Goofy was so startled that he forgot to watch where he was going. Crunch! The car banged into a piece of metal by the side of the road, and the car groaned to a halt. Mickey and Sam climbed out of the car. That's just a frilled lizard, Goofy, Sam explained. In spite of the way it looks, it's harmless. It was just trying to scare us. Gosh, said Goofy, it sure worked. And look at the car. Is there a repair shop around here? About 100 miles away, said Sam, laughing. But don't worry about the car. I can fix just about anything. Meanwhile, Mickey was examining the piece of metal that the car had hit. What could this be, he wondered. This sure is a strange place to find a piece of metal. What do you boys and girls think that this piece of metal is from? Those are some good guesses. We'll have to wait and see. Then Mickey looked up as he heard Sam's voice. Hey, Mickey, called Sam. Let's set up camp here for the night. Great idea, said Mickey as he trotted back to the car. I'll gather some wood for a fire. I'll go down to the stream and catch some fish for dinner, added Goofy. And I should have the car fixed in no time at all, said Sam. Mickey returned with the wood and began to set up the tents. Sam finished fixing the car and pronounced it as good as new. What's taking Goofy so long, Mickey wondered. I'm hungry. Me too, agreed Sam. Let's go down to the stream and see if he's had any luck. They grabbed 2 fishing poles and took off. Hi, Goofy, said Mickey. We came to help you fish. Gosh, said Goofy, I haven't even begun. I don't want to hit this funny-looking duck with the fish hook, but I can't get it to move. Sam and Mickey laughed. That's no duck, Goofy, said Sam. That is a platypus. A what? Said Goofy in a puzzled voice. A platypus, Sam repeated. Platypuses are mammals, but they lay eggs and have duck bills. We're probably near her nest. That's why she won't move. Mickey, Sam, and Goofy moved downstream, and before long they caught plenty of fish. Back at camp, they watched the sunset. Sam pointed out Ayers Rock, a beautiful sandstone mountain in the distance. Suddenly, a loud howl startled the campers. What was that? Asked Goofy. Sounds like dingoes, said Sam. They're wild dogs. Let me borrow your boomerang to scare them away, Goofy. Sam threw the curved stick into the dusk. It whistled over the heads of the dingoes, then sailed right back into his hand. It looks like it works. They're running away scared. The next morning, everyone woke up bright and early. Sam finished loading the car. He noticed Goofy playing with a little yellow dog. Goofy, cried Sam, get away! That's a wild dingo! Gosh, said Goofy. I've never seen a wild dingo with a collar before. Oh, what does it mean when an animal has a collar around its neck? Right, it belongs to someone. So why would there be a pet wandering in the middle of Australia? Let's see. Sam and Mickey cautiously walked over to look at the dog, who was indeed wearing a collar. The dog wagged his tail happily. "This one isn't wild," Sam observed. "It belongs to Dingo Dan," Mickey exclaimed, reading the tag on the dog's collar. At the sound of Dingo Dan's name, the dog jumped up and began to run down the road. Mickey, Goofy, and Sam followed. They followed the dog to a clearing where an old man was sitting by a plane. "You must be Dingo Dan," said Mickey, introducing himself, Goofy, and Sam. "Good day, mate," said Dingo Dan, shaking Mickey's hand. "Am I glad to see you three." "What happened to your plane?" asked Sam. "I can't figure it out," said Dan. "Something went wrong a couple of weeks ago. I made an emergency landing and I've been stuck here with my dog, Digger, ever since." "Let me take a look at your plane," said Sam. "Maybe I can fix it." Sam walked around the plane. Then he said, "There's a piece missing here. We'll have to go to Sydney for a replacement." "Oh dear," said Dan. "I promised the zoo a shipment of leaves over 2 weeks ago. How are they going to feed the koalas?" "A piece is missing from his airplane. Why does that sound a little suspicious?" Right. Mickey had found a piece of metal earlier. That's what their car hit. Good job. Good observation. Mickey thought for a minute. Then he snapped his fingers. "I'll bet I can help," he said. "Wait right here." In a little while, Mickey returned with the piece of metal that the car had hit. "Is this the missing piece?" "It sure is," said Sam. "Allow me," he told Dingo Dan, and he quickly made the repair. "Hey, you're pretty good at fixing planes," Dan said to Sam. "What do you think about being my partner? This plane is almost as old as I am, and we both break down quite a bit." Sam agreed happily, and he and Dingo Dan shook hands. "Now the koalas are sure to get their leaves on time," exclaimed Goofy. Back at the zoo, the koalas munched happily on a fresh shipment of their favorite leaves. "I'm sure Dingo Dan and Sam will be able to deliver all your shipments on time from now on," Mickey told Mr. Winsett. "I can't thank you enough," said Mr. Winsett. "You and Goofy saved the day." "We're the ones who should be thanking you," said Mickey. "We had such a wonderful time in Australia. Didn't we, Goofy?" "Goofy?" Mickey looked around to see Goofy lying on the ground in front of the koalas. "Goofy, what are you doing down there?" Mickey asked. "Guess what?" Goofy said happily. "I finally got the boomerang to come back." Oh my goodness. And that's the end. So, today we read the story Mickey and Goofy Down Under, an adventure in Australia. We learned about the animals in Australia. First, we learned about koalas, and that there are over 603 types of leaves that they could eat, but they only eat about 20. Sounds like they're a little picky to me. We also learned about kangaroos. What was special about kangaroos and their babies? Very good. Their babies are so small, so they carry them in their pouch until they're big enough to be on their own. And we also learned about the animal called a platypus that kind of looks like a duck. And something special about platypuses are they're mammals, but they still lay eggs. And Goofy learned how to throw his boomerang at the end. So there were 3 big events over this whole story that we learned about and that we went over. And I have 3 very important pictures here. This one, there are koalas and they're eating leaves. So they have the leaves that they need to eat. Here I have a picture of Dingo Dan, Mickey, Goofy, and Sam. and they had just found his airplane. And then I have a picture of some koalas in the zoo, but there's something missing. What do you see that's missing in this picture? Good. They don't have any leaves. So let's use these three pictures in an activity to discuss the sequential events in a story. So at the beginning of the story, there was a problem, and it was the first event in the story. And what was the problem that needed solved? Very good! The koalas had no leaves. So that was the first major event in our story out of these three pictures that I have. So we'll go ahead and hang it up. And I have two pictures left. Now, something happened in the middle of the story that helped to solve the problem. So out of these two pictures, what helped solve the problem that Mickey and Goofy had? Good! They found Dingo Dan in his airplane, and Mickey remembered the piece of metal that they had hit, and it helped get Dingo Dan's plane back up in the air. And lastly, because Dingo Dan was able to get his plane fixed, he was able to do what the zoo needed, which was good! Get the leaves to feed the koalas at the zoo, so then the koalas could stay at the zoo. Well, very good, friends. You have a really good memory. You paid great attention. You kept your ears open and you kept your eyes on me. Now, we finished studying the continent of Australia this week, so next week we're going to move on to some other ones.